Hey, Unicorn Nation, what's going on? Max Finn here with another episode of the Unicorn Perspective. Today's guest is Jordan Menard. Jordan is just a rock star marketer, media buyer. He's the guy behind pretty much all of the big courses. So all the biggest names in the course space that you see the info product space, you probably see ads everywhere. He is kind of the guy behind the scenes that has been making all of that work, the traffic work, and helping them scale and grow. Plus, he runs ads for a lot of other big organizations. And so, we've become really good friends the last few years. And anytime I get to hop on a call with him and chat, which is a pretty regular basis, is always fun. What's always great about it is we just have a lot of synergies. So typically we go a lot deeper than just media buying. We talk about everything you could think of. And this interview was no exception to that. We went probably an hour and a half. So definitely a longer interview. So you want to grab a coffee or Red Bull or something like that. But we covered everything from kind of the state of media buying today, what media buyers are doing right, what they're doing wrong, what's wrong with their mindset and expectations, things beyond just the tricks and the hacks, all the way to how to grow a business effectively, what's the right mindset set for your goals, expectations there. We talk about kind of the current events of what's happening with big tech, what's happening with Facebook and Amazon and Apple, and how's that going to impact us as both marketers, entrepreneurs, and just consumers and human beings. And then we even ended the episode talking about the future of politics. So a lot of stuff here, really exciting. There's a little bit of something for everybody. You're really going to enjoy it. See you in the interview. All right, Jordan, what's up, brother? So I think you're the second person. I had Rich on for a second time. Well, technically, he had me. I reached out to him. This is like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I said, "Hey, man, it's kind of last minute. We needed an episode for this week because somebody dropped out. And could you chat and like hop on?" And he's like, yeah, I'd love to. But actually, I'm doing a 2-hour live stream today. Do you want to like come hang out with me and we can use it and like double it as your episode? And I was like, yeah, it sounds great. And so I ended up like spending 2 hours on his live stream and just repurposed it for mine. And I joked to him, I was like, dude, that's how persuasive he is. He was able to I reached out to him to get him on my show and he ended up getting me on his live. So he did 2 episodes. So you're back for a second one. Hopefully we can chat a little longer this time. And the last time you had places to go. You're a busy guy, so we have some time blocked out today to chat.
We do, and I think one of the topics we'll probably talk on is being busy and how that can be an absolute killer of productivity. But yeah, definitely got a lot on my plate. I pretty much have at least, we can go 2 hours if you want. I think it's so funny that you hit up Rich to do something with you on your stuff, and he's like, well, I'm doing something. Why don't you just do that? And then that's it. It's like not even a compromise, but it worked.
Yeah, it did work. Although he is, I think he's back in Florida now, but was living out of like a hotel. And so he had like dial up internet. So it's just brutal. Like the few times we chat with that slow internet at the hotel. Well, let's talk about that. So like, this is the beauty of doing this and like not having structure or any idea of what I'm going to talk about is like, we can talk about whatever we want. And since you brought that up, it wasn't you and I forget who I was talking to about this the other day, about like multitasking. So it wasn't you, it was my friend Kylie. And we were talking about multitasking and you and I, just before we went live, we were talking about, your monitor setup and the fact that you have this kind of fluid one screen and I have multiple screens and stuff. Like this concept of multitasking is pretty interesting. I think it's been like it's been a big push, right? It's like, you got to multitask. We need to have all this stuff going on. But the reality is like multitasking is just not a real thing, right? Like true multitasking would be like, if I'm able to somehow split or like compartmentalize my brain to be functioning independently at the same time and doing multiple activities simultaneously and focusing on all of them, which is, unless there's some like, genetic abnormality out there where there's some superhuman that can do that, that we don't know of yet.
Professor X.
Yeah. It's just not possible.
So what you're talking about is actually well referenced in the literature base, right? It's called the cognitive bottleneck theory. And the cognitive bottleneck theory says it's pretty basic, right? It's like, if you're executing a task, your brain cannot simultaneously execute another task. And so I think lots of times we like to say we're multitasking when we're on Slack, when we're writing emails, and we're checking apps. But the reality is, none of those things are moving the needle in any way, shape, or form. And I think the trap that media buyers and online entrepreneurs fall into is I come into my day, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I start checking my ads, I refresh, and then just keep clicking a few things. Before I know it, it's 5 p.m., right? And I convinced myself I had a full work day. And so you throw in meetings and all the people that need to talk to you. And if I don't actively defend my schedule and cancel meetings, my whole week is gone. So it's a trap.
Yeah, it's weird. It's this, and I don't know what started it, right? Like I don't know when in time this started, but this idea of like if I'm actively doing stuff for a long period of time, I feel more productive, more accomplished than if I spend a lot less time doing something. Like it's this idea that just it's like time is the most valuable input
Yeah.
into like how effective you feel as a worker. And it's probably, I mean, it's probably a combination of things, right? It's probably just the way that like the whole American work week has been structured, where it's very, across the board for decades and decades and generations. It's been you work Monday to Friday, you work 8 to 5, you work nine to
Yeah.
six, and that's what you do.
Yes.
But then also it's like influencers in the last few years that have consistently put out content that's basically making people feel like they need to work nonstop. And if they aren't, then they're also not being effective. And I think both those things are flawed. Like for us, and I don't know if you operate the same way with your team. Like I frankly don't care. I have a more like a Netflix approach, right? It's like I don't care if you work 2 days a week or 7 days a week, or if you put in 2 hours of work today or 8 hours. What I care about is like, are you producing, right? Like
Yeah.
is my investment in you as a team member, or even myself, is what I'm paying myself. Are we getting a positive ROI on that? Like are we accomplishing goals? Are we moving forward? And that should be like the barometer of whether somebody is effective, not how many hours they put in. And like, I don't know how you change
Yeah. I,
that.
I, I could not agree more. And I would bet that, because I do the same thing, and I would bet that that actually works really well for you, not only financially, but also your employees really love it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have a story with my copywriter who he came into work one day and he was just like, I could tell he was troubled. So I pulled him aside. He came in late, and just like, I don't know, it was weird. And I was like, yo, like, what's up? And he's like, stressed out because, he fell in love with this girl. And I was like, dude, okay, let me stop you right there. In 2 months, if you want to go live there for 6 weeks, go do that, right? I want you, everything's fine. The question should not be like, do I have to choose between my job and my spouse ever, right? That should never, ever happen. And, and so once he understood that the energy should be devoted to how can I be mega productive while I'm living overseas, it just see the weight dissolve. And what's funny to me is you and I are taking almost counter-cultural points to how like managers think you need to manage. You need to stay on top of productivity ruthlessly. You need to manage their, standardized lunch breaks, all this psycho that hardworking people despise. And when you let people be themselves, I find that you get more out of them, and there's less rub, there's less like disrespect, less like it's just hey, we have a common goal. Let's make this money. And when people are valuable, and you set up a system where they're valued on their actual value, I know that's weird. It tends to work out the best.
Yeah. And then it's also about like, do people like the current structure for most companies is it's a combination of like also having weird schedules and putting a lot of pressure on them to show up and work these hours. And then it's the other thing I think that's happening is like a lack of trust being put on people, and a lack of like, we're going to empower you to make decisions that might work and they might not work, right? Like there's a sense that like we as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we understand that risk is inherent in winning. Like you can't really succeed
Yeah.
unless you take risks. You can play it super safe, but your chances of actually succeeding are really, really slim, right? And this is like in Misbehaving, one of Thaler's books that I just finished. It's interesting. He was talking. He went and like sat down at like a big public company, and he had the CEO kind of in the back of the room and the executives and stuff. And then he had basically all the managers, people that like make really day to day run departments and stuff. And he gave them basically like a basic math problem, which is, hey, if you had the ability to, run this project and there was a 50% chance that you would make, $2 million and a 50% chance that you would lose $1 million, like, would you do this? And the numbers might be a little off there, but like basically it was a no-brainer decision from the CEO. It was like, hey, if it was 23 managers and if all 23 did this, we would net, I think it was, like $6 million based on just statistics. And what was interesting though is none of the managers said yes. Like I think maybe 6% of them said they would do it. And it was because
Wow.
the upside wasn't like there was no upside really for them. There was only downside, right? So if they tried this new project and it failed and they lost $1 million, they would probably be fired. But if they took a big risk and they made the company a few $1 million, they'd get a pat on the back or maybe a 3-month bonus, something like that. And he found that like the same thing happens with the NFL. Like it's just going back to like human psychology and how we just misbehave, how we do things that don't really make sense. You
Sure.
like statistically, most like on most plays, fourth and whatever, teams should go for it. Like teams go for it way less than they should on fourth down. Like most teams
Yeah.
punt, right? And he says statistically, teams. I think it was Nate Silver did the statistics. New York Times did this like a few, like maybe 5-10 years ago. They found that if teams basically went for it on fourth down, like every fourth down, they would statistically win an extra half a game a season, which doesn't seem like a lot, but you have 16 games. So over 2 seasons, you pick up an extra win
Sure.
just by going for it. But again, it goes back to risk reward. It's the reason like coaches don't do it is because if they fail, like they're going to get fired. Like it looks bad. The owners, they don't want to take they want to take risk, but the coaches and the people under them don't have really the upside in it, right? They just get the downside blame. And so like hearing more about this, it's interesting. Like how do you as a CEO and owner of a company, how do you empower your team to take risks? And how do you empower them to say like, hey, it's okay to, work a different schedule, like giving basically your team members tools to succeed and giving them latitude to take risks, because that's what you want. Like you don't want to have a
Yeah.
company where you are the sole person responsible for coming up with big ideas and executing big ideas. You want to have a company of people that
Yeah.
like innovate and take risks and feel comfortable to, hey, sometimes you lose and you might lose more than you win, but those wins are massive.
Yeah, definitely. So, man, okay, great question. And like, I really love the build up to that. Not only do I love like Nate Silver's models just in general, I think they're really awesome. I think he has a really cool approach and he came out of nowhere. He just like has his own
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And
Um,
crazy, just
but
one point before I forget. So just on
yeah,
Nate,
yeah,
like
yeah.
the craziest part of all of that is once New York Times like came out with this and Nate Silver came out with that basically saying that, hey, if you go for it on fourth and down, on average over a season, you'll pick up a half a win. The percent of teams in the NFL going for it on fourth down actually went down, which is just
Oh,
crazy.
no way.
It's actually
That's
lower today than it was pre this study coming out, which is just nuts.
crazy. Yeah. So on that note, I think a lot of business owners are actually afraid of data points that make them feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I'll give you an example. We had 1 month where our on the phone sales were phenomenal. We're spending like, $250,000 a month booking calls with ads. And the next month, we had about a 12% decrease, which is that's a lot,
Yeah.
so month over month. And so I pull, the guy that runs my team, and I pull him into my office, and I'm like, what's going on, man? Like, is this something we should be worried about? Is this, And he goes, to be honest, man, you've been having me come into the office every day in the morning, and I know it's important that I'm here, like, because he runs a team, you know what I mean? He goes, but that morning time is where I had my deepest focus. I could really either close deals or I could do things that move the needle for the team from a management perspective. And at that point, I was kind of caught back, but then I started looking at the data, and I realized that there was a point to this. He did have sales that had registered multiple times from the time period of 10 to 1, and so that was a moment where like I was kind of confronted with some data that told me two things. One, I was wrong, and two, this whole like I had to admit it and change course because my poor decision had caused real economic impact in my business that was measurable. Right now, I'm not saying it was the 12% was solely because of that, but at that point, I made a decision. Hey, come in at 2 p.m. every day, right? Like that's less than half the day. But all he needs to do is be there to touch base with his team, keep up morale, keep momentum. And if they know he's coming in and on Slack in the morning working from home, everything's good. And so we started doing that. And wouldn't you know it, we rebounded. And so I think that's a good example of how you have to listen to your team and accept the fact that you can be wrong, even if you're right most of the time. You can be wrong, and correcting that and doing the right thing will actually build respect in your employees as opposed to like showing weakness or whatever Sun Tzu weird bullshit people try to pull there. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think that I love Sun Tzu, by the way. It's very overused in business. And so, yeah, I think that the biggest thing is you need to remember that like how to get people to take risk, right? You need to remember that your employees are going to leave you if you do not find a way to give them the ability to make as much money as they can per month, right? So I do a share, right? The copywriter who writes ads gets a percentage of the revenue that we get from the bonus of our clients. Same with the media buyer, the sale, everyone gets paid. And then all the employees also get a small percentage of the growth of the company. So you have this incentivized system where the employees feel free to speak their mind because they know if they're right, I'll listen to them and I'll actually make, a lot of people think that they have an open door policy because anyone can say anything. But if you don't take that information and do something with it and actualize and make realistic changes, people are going to know that you're just a fake, right? They're going to know that it's a fake open door policy, and then they're going to distrust you. So you have to actually do it. And so when you have that combination of like, I have real input into the operations of this company, and then I am compensated as a major player, and then you tell them, hey, if you work here 5 years, we'll give you ownership in the company. I do that with all my guys that I think are valuable that I want to keep. You create this dynamic where everyone's on the same team. A win is a win for everyone, and people want to take risks. And then I tell them, hey, let's get the failures out quick, right? Let's take those risks. Let's expose ourselves, even though the rule of business is to limit your exposure. Let's go ahead and expose ourselves, see where we're weak, and then build ourselves up to where we're not hiding exposure because we're weak. We're hiding exposure because we're strategic. And you only learn how to take the right risk after you've been burned a few times. And so encouraging my employees to come into this environment knowing exactly what you said, that there is no reward without risk, is key to getting them to take that risk and get that disproportionate reward with me and not have to be the one that is only moving the needle, like you said.
Yeah. And you don't want to wait until like, what you don't want to have happen is not do that from day one and basically put employees in a position where like they're not able to be creative and think outside the box, and they're doing something that maybe isn't producing results, and it's getting worse and worse and worse because like human beings inherently don't like taking risk in standard situations. We're pretty risk averse, except when the chips are really, really down or really, really up and we're playing with house money, right? Like that's, when people go to the casino and they're up and they take money off the table, now they're playing with the house's money, they're much more likely to take risks. And then on the flip side, it's like if you go to a horse track and you're betting, at the end of the day, they found that the odds on the long shots get worse, which means that more people bet on long shots
More
towards
people
the
are.
end of the day, because if you've lost money all day, now you're like, well, I'm really in the hole. So you become more risky. You're like, I need to get back what I've lost. So I'm willing to place a more risky bet. And that puts you in the hole even deeper. And so you don't want employees in that set either, where they're taking risks out of perceived necessity and they're not like intelligent risks anymore. And that's something people don't think
Yeah,
about either.
it's a reactive.
Yeah.
It's a reactive risk, right? I think that's a huge thing. I love that metaphor, right? I'm taking risks to survive. I'm not taking risks to grow. Two totally different things. Now, the reason people get comfortable with the house money thing is because they're on a winning streak. They feel like they're up, and now they feel like they're not going to have less than what they had when they started. But that should never be the question. The question should be, how can I grow what I have in the most efficient way possible? If that's the true question, then risky scenarios are there, because if you're going to go after a 20-to-1 payout with a smaller percentage, the cool thing about being in business is you can adapt and mitigate things along the way to increase those chances as you go. And so I strive to do in my job is like find the best ways for us to grow. All of them are very risky if you just look at the fact that we only have so much time in the day and we have our own internal projects that we're building. Um, but at the end of the day, when you get people to realize that there's really no point in just not losing, right? But that defeats the whole purpose. Then their innate risk averse personality kind of starts to rub against the general vibe of the company. And what I always say to my employees is, wisdom is recognizing when you're wrong and learning from someone else's mistakes. And so I think when you preach that in the culture, people will realize, hey, I'm rubbing against the company vibe, and I learned from people that didn't make it here because of this. I need to change, and that's a wise thing to do. And I think that kind of is the psychology of how you can get, or how I get my employees who were Uber drivers before to, take risks in the Facebook ad realm that have disproportionate payouts.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. I'm wondering like if the what people see online drives, like especially in the media buying marketing world, if that drives how people, I mean, I know it does, but like just how significant it is, because it's the other flip side is you don't see a lot of failures and losses because people don't talk about it. And so the perception, this is not just media buying, this is with everything online nowadays. It's you see a
Yeah,
one-sided view of every single person's life, right? So it's very,
yeah,
very, very few people are sharing the bad stuff. They're sharing the negativity, the losses, the bad days, the bad thoughts, all that stuff. And so if you're a onlooker and you follow a bunch of people and you're a media buyer or marketer, an entrepreneur, and all you see all day is success. Hey, I launched a Shopify store and I'm already doing 500,000 a month. And or I launched, this Facebook campaign yesterday and I'm making $10,000 a day. If that skews how you approach like launching a store or how you approach running ads, I'm curious like what your thought. I have some thoughts on it, but I'm curious like what your initial reaction is.
yeah. So I think that it that's a so I think that has two major impacts. I think the first one is on people who want to be entrepreneurs but are not there yet. And they have a very, like Peter Thiel says, the only real growth that you should value as an investor is steady, small, incremental, because that's what leads to that good to great jump, right? If you constantly grow, and that's the only way to really grow. But a lot of people, when they want to get into business, see those people that we're talking about, those posts, those ads, whatever, and they think, oh, if I'm not doing 500,000 on my first Shopify store, something is wrong. And it completely removes it's a bad optimization event essentially. And so you can waste a lot of time and money doing that. And then I think on the flip side, people that are in business, it has two negative effects. The first is it incentivizes them to do the same thing, which
Yep.
is frame their data and their successes in a way that are very one-sided. And two, it removes the most important discussions that need to be had in this community, which is how, as an entrepreneur, do I handle the losses and the difficult times and the emotional turmoil? And so I would say those are the main effects I see. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it sets unrealistic expectations, and this sense that if I don't hit it out of the gate like right away, that I'm doing something wrong. And we talked, you and I were chatting yesterday, and we spoke about this where people don't give things enough time because they think that if I launch a new product or a new ad, it should work right out of the gate. And if it doesn't work, it's got to be because I didn't set the campaign up right, or I'm using the wrong optimization for budgets, or I'm using the wrong objective, or the
Yes.
wrong bid, or I'm using dynamic creative instead of just standard ads. Like they're looking for all these fixes, right? They're like,
Yeah.
this person who posted this, they must be doing something I'm not doing. And for me, what I found most interesting, like an observation I've had over the last few years, being super lucky and blessed to get to build friendships with like all the most successful people I think in our industry. Pretty much, I think
Yeah.
I either know them pretty well or we're friends, but like we all do different things. That's what's fascinating to me. Like I assumed, and I imagine a lot of people who are new to the industry have this assumption that there are these fundamental gold standard strategies that all the top people know, like these secrets, right? That we meet and we get
Yeah.
together and we have like, here's the golden circle campaign strategy that all the insiders know. And it's like a cheat code. Like if you create a
Yes.
CBO campaign at $233.33 and you use 4 ad sets and you use dynamic creative and you use a cost cap bid of this amount, that it unlocks something magical. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden it just rains money. And the reality is like I run ads differently than Tim runs ads, and I'm sure he runs ads differently than you run ads, who runs ads differently. Like you can go through the list of people and we all are successful and all make it work.
Yeah.
And so I think people are like looking at the wrong variable. They're looking at the wrong thing that if they change, it'll lead to success. And that's probably the biggest issue that I see happening is they see all these people and they think they're all doing something that I need to just figure it out. And but in doing that, they overlook all these really fundamental things that like if you just did these things, you would have so much more success. You wouldn't have to worry about this. Like if I'm sure you've seen it, like I'll see a lot of ad accounts, people that come to us and want to run ads or consulting, and like some of them are just awful. Like they're doing everything wrong, but they're
Yeah.
making money
Yeah.
because they have everything else figured out. The
Right.
product's amazing, the brand's amazing, it's unique. It has a target demo that's unique. They built a great frame for that. Their offer is great, like their pricing's on point. Like all of those things are dialed in and perfect. And so they can get away with just being god awful at paid traffic, but actually make money. And that's hard. It takes a lot of time. So people don't look at that. They want to find something else and they think that all of us are doing something else to be successful and that the other stuff really doesn't move the needle as much.
Dude, 100%. So I, I mean, I honestly, I think what you just said, like I wish that, well, I know it's being recorded, but like I wish more people could understand what you just laid down, because it would literally change their entire business. So many people are looking for that little tiny hack that does not exist. And they think that the guys at the top level, like when I go to Tim Bird's house and we hang out and talk internet stuff, they think that we're like just aligning, we break out the ad and it's exactly the same. And, we have, and that's not what it is. It's exactly the opposite. It's like, it's what you said. Tim does something that it's different. And so if I can get one little tiny nugget out of that combo with Tim that I can apply to my ecosystem, and it can start to, thrive and adapt there, then that's a win. And that's how I get everything. Tim Bird gave me a pixel like tip one time, and I gave him like an ad set budget remarketing tip. And those were very, very small things, but we still talk about it to this day because they fit into the general theory of what we do. And that's the biggest thing, is a lot of people are looking for those static black and white things, those tangible, if I click this button different, the results will change dramatically. When in reality, the theory of everything is off, they don't look at the theoretical approach, the framework that they have to solving these issues is not there. We just got a client and it was very similar to what you said, except they were missing two things. It was a great product. They had the audience, they had everything, but they forgot about the offer. Mm-hmm. And that's it's a huge thing that so many people overlook. And when you and I talk, it's like, that's the number one thing, right? It's like, hey, what's the offer and angle that is really working for you right now? Oh, sorry, cut out there.
No, you're good.
But yeah, it's like, what's the offer and the angle that's working for you? It's these big level things. And that's because if you can get those right, all the little CBO ad set, 3 ad sets versus 2, manual bid, cost cap versus target cost, those will work themselves out, and you'll find those results easy. Media buyers are naturally predisposed to want to do those things. They don't want to write another angle. They don't want to think about the offer, what makes me purchase this product because I think I'm getting a good deal. And it's looking at that theoretical framework from a holistic level, and then looking at ads as just an amplifier of all that back end work that leads people to succeed, not the getting a Shopify store that makes 500,000 in 1 month and I chase that quick fix. Those things lead people to crash and burn.
Yeah, it's super true. And I think like the big thing that we found is like things become exponentially easier when you have a highly engaged audience that you're speaking to, right? Like when you're able to emotionally connect with an audience. And I think it's a lot of people start, I'm going to misquote this and I forget who was talking about this. Basically, like, and I know Rich told me AJ Abraham said this. So, but basically like a lot of entrepreneurs and people in our community, they focus first on all the wrong things when they're launching something instead of focusing on like the customer, right? Like who is the customer that I want to build something around, and what are their biggest problems? What are their biggest goals and biggest motivations? And how can I build a brand and a product that is for them, right? It's for that audience. And we've seen that like with our Proud Patriots brand. I mean, that illustrates that concept better than anything, because it's like a very, very passionate group of people that are on the right, that support our president, and everything we put out resonates, right? Like, because it's just, the brand aligns, it fits perfectly with what they want and what they need. And it becomes a lot easier when you do that. Like when you know that every ad I put out there is going to hit off the chart engagement. Like I think every ad we've run for that store for the last 6 months has had above average engagement. Like every single ad gets hundreds, thousands of comments. It gets shared all over the place. And that makes it a lot easier to buy media when you have an audience that actually cares about your brand and what you're advertising, and you don't have to force it. But people are so worried. It's like, how do I get more likes? Like, what's a hack to get more, comments and engagement on my ad? It's like, well, there's not a hack to it. It's create something people want to engage with. Like it's so simple. It's like, well, what would you, if you saw this ad in your feed, would you like it or comment on or share it on your feed to all your friends? And the answer is usually going to be no, because why would I want to basically all my friends say like, why do you just share this thing says, 50% off gadget X, link, buy now, which is the standard ad copy most dropshippers use. It's like really basic with an
Right.
image of a product with a
Right.
sticker on it. Like, why in the hell would
Right.
anybody share that or engage with it other than to say they don't like it and get off my feed? So it's we overthink a lot, right? We're always thinking like there's got to be it's a different solution instead of the one that seems most obvious and right in front of our face.
Okay, so I have a really good story to
Love it.
like basically establish what you just said in a real world example. So I had a client who had it was actually with Robert Kiyosaki, and they it was a book, and it was to the same audience that you were just
Yep.
talking about. And so we were it was us versus another agency, and basically if you get an offer and you do really well, and they're only going to give you that offer because they don't want someone else running on
Yep.
the same page, running on the same URL. And so it's kind of a zero sum game. And so I knew that, and they had another account that I really wanted, and so it was my goal to just like scale as much as I can to show the client that, hey, you should give me that account. And so that's what we did. Now we had the biggest thing that I ask my copywriters or anyone that's making angles is, like, what is this? What does it make you feel when you read the ad? What does it make you feel? And that's a weird question in a digital marketing company, because most, we're all like, well, what's the CPA? What's it's all data driven. But this is more like, hey, what do you feel when you read this ad? And our biggest thing is we want to make the purchase of the product associated with a bigger movement. So I assume the same thing happens in your brand, where when you go to that same audience who's very passionate, they associate the purchase of your product with the participation in that movement,
Yep.
the support of the president. It's so much bigger than the mere purchase of a commodity, right? And so we found it was the exact same thing. Our CTR all would be like 15%. I'm not exaggerating, which that's just a pure measurement of scroll stopping, right? Our unique link CTR would be like 7%, 8%, like stupid high. And what we were doing was just simple ad campaigns, massive budgets, maybe manual bidding a little bit, but very just basic shit. And it crushed to the point that we got the other team, they were actually released, and we got that account. So I knew this agency. They're super, legendary in the space. I could not wait to get into that ad account and see what they were doing. I get into that ad account, and it's basically the exact opposite of what we were doing. There's like 49 campaigns. There's like 7,000 ad sets. There's like all these rules that are turning everything off and on. I'm seeing they're spending like, $10,000 in 4 hours, and then everything shuts off. Meanwhile, I'm spending $30,000 a day, and I don't even have automated rules, right? It's just running. I'm just letting it go. And it's funny because I'm like, here these guys are, and they're probably smarter than I am, but they overcomplicated the shit out of this thing, tried to put Facebook in a box, and it blew up in their face. I just worked with what I had, was realistic, and really just looked on it. How can I make content that is so valuable? When I pump it through paid ads, it doesn't matter if I get every little precise detail right. It's going to work no matter what. And because I put my focus there, I ended up winning against people who had way more resources, way more stuff than me. And that's the key thing. But no one wants to look at it. They want to keep figuring out how they can make the bid cap super low with accelerated and the rules, and it's just you're doing way too much. But it makes me feel like I'm smart and sophisticated, when the reality is I should go write another ad. I should go figure out a more incentivizing way to offer my product. But that's the type of work that's hard to do.
Yeah, it's like what we've noticed is the impact of launching a new angle is significant compared to anything else. Like, you can have incremental gains and they can be noticeable and important by changing other things. But like when we make changes like that, that's when we've been able to say, hey, this offer doesn't work, to now it's working. Like, new angle, right? Like when we did for like Alpha Brain, when we started running, work from home stuff, like did totally different angle. Everything up to that was about, like fitness, and it was like productivity. It was, kind of more generic. And we got hyper focused on how, tough it is to stay focused working at home and specific avatars there. And all of a sudden, like our CPAs went down to, 16, $18 on a $55 payout. And we scaled it like crazy because we didn't have to worry about anything else. We know the angle works, and there's a lot of people working from home, and it's going to resonate and it's going to scale. It's like when you find things that work in other ways, like it might be a bid or something like that, and then you were like, well, why did it start tanking after a few days? It's because like the fundamentals aren't there, right? Like when you find an angle that works or a product that's hot, you can scale the crap out of that without worrying about other things because the fundamentals are there, and it resonates with people. And it's hard to teach that, right? Because it's not as sexy, and it's not as cut and dry as saying, hey, structure your campaigns like this, or this is the way you set up these audiences. It's harder to put it into a course framework, right?
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be more education out there that's focused on like a holistic view of advertising, right? That goes beyond just technicals of a platform, because people, that's all the courses are right now. It's like and we're guilty of it too. It's you get hyper focused on a platform because that's how you resonate. It's hard. We talked about this yesterday. It's hard to stand out when you're trying to put too much into a program. But people need it. Like you need to learn a lot more than just how to set up YouTube ads or Facebook ads and how to do technicals.
100%. So I have a course. I know you do as well. People buy my course and they think that when they open it, they're going to get right into the nitty gritty of Facebook ads and learn how to become a Facebook wizard ASAP, right? And a lot of people are surprised to find that like day 2, I talk about like reading, exercising, and meditating, right? Like that's day 2. And now a lot of it goes it's centered around character-based habit formation, right? So it's centered around something bigger than just those 3 activities. And it's not just to do it to, there's a lot of intention behind it. But the whole first week, we don't talk about ads one time. And that's because all the ad techniques, tricks, everything we're going to teach you, how to set up YouTube, how to set up Facebook, how to set up Instagram, how to scale, how to all those things. And we're going to teach you those. But if you are not a successful person, it is irrelevant. It literally does not matter if you know it or not, because you're going to fail no matter what. And so I think a lot of the courses that are out there that are teaching people how to make money online don't address the biggest issue, which is how do you become a successful person? Yeah. Right? The internet is not a place where non-successful people can just become successful. I guess it is in like on YouTube and stuff, if you go viral, making ridiculous YouTube videos. But even then, you're providing content to people, and that's why you're succeeding. So people don't look at it from how can I create the best content and offer a solution to a problem in the most appealing way possible. They look at it as how can I sell a bunch of shit online? And I think that's why I created my course, right? I don't talk about ad buying before I've taught like a full 5-step ad creation framework that teaches people the basic outline for how we make all of our ads so exciting, how we can win any creative split test, really, not just because like sheer volume, we're just going to write 70 ads over a 2-month time period and test everything until we find the winner, but also it's, I meet with my team for 30 minutes every single morning at 10 a.m. and 90% of that conversation is about what type of content we're making that day. And so I think the reason, course makers don't go there is because that shit is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard to make stuff that really works for people. And I've been working on this course for over a year because it was so difficult. Everything I kept making, I was throwing away because I'm like, look, this may sell, but it will not change people's lives. It will not work. It will not be a central thing that they use every day. And making that required me to develop my own platform, take it off Kajabi to get the extra functionality that I needed to make everything happen under one roof. And it ended up being a journey that was way longer. If I would have known what it would have cost to start this, I probably never would have done it. But now I'm here, so I guess I'm somewhat glad I didn't know. But yeah, that's a very tall order, and I think it's the exact same thing that the online advertiser will do, where they're just dinking around in the ad sets. So do course creators. They do the same thing on a course creation level.
Yeah, and the program is Traffic Pilot, right? That's the name of it. So anybody
Yeah,
that's watching right
yeah,
now can go check it out. Because yeah, it's so much more than just the and we talked about this repeatedly throughout the last 45 minutes. It's so much more than the details and technicals. But even things like you said, like meditating and reading. I mean, it's interesting. I think a lot of people wonder, like, how do certain people like write so much? How do they come up with emails like all the time and social posts, like, and create content all the time? It's really easy when you're also equally as active consuming content, right? Like when you're
yeah,
reading all the time and stuff, that stuff becomes super
yeah.
easy because, like, if you're reading for an hour or so a day, or listen to Audible for 30 minutes an hour a day, like, just like the beginning of this thing, I had like three stories, and that's like just from the other day, just reading Misbehaving. Like, it becomes a lot easier. It's like, oh, that's an interesting story from this guy, and I can see how that can fit into what we talk about.
Yes.
And same thing with writing copy and angles. It's, if you're stuck in your bubble, right? If you're stuck, like, everything I know is in my head right now, and so I'm drawing from that. I'm drawing all my creativity from what's already here, as opposed to every day I'm consuming more stuff. I'm taking other people's perspective, other stories, and then I'm also meditating daily, where I'm just blocking things out and opening my brain. Like, ideas flow. Like, it's a really
That's it.
interesting thing. And again, like, people don't talk about it because it's like, it's not as sexy to say, like, hey, I have a program that's going to teach you how to read more and meditate daily. Like, nobody's going to be like,
Yeah.
yeah, I need to watch a 2-hour webinar on that and then drop $1,000 on that program. But it's so important. Like, and I don't know how. That's the challenge sometimes, like, as a marketer trying to think through these things, like how you make people like change their priorities and like value things that they should be valuing more. Like, I don't know how you, and it's
Dude,
frustrating sometimes because it's like, I should be able to come up with a solution to how to convey that to people, that this is more important than this. But it's just like decades of just programming that you need to overcome in a lot of people.
so Rich Sheffrin, I love how we bring him up. It's funny because one of the things that me and you bonded over when we first started talking was that he's a mentor to both of us.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of mentors, but Rich is a very special one.
Yep.
And I assume you feel the same way.
Yep.
And he's so outside the box. Like, that guy it's really incredible. Um, so Rich, Rich, he compares, like, he says one of the reasons that people fail the most is that uh, they're, well, let me take it a step back. So he defines a market as a group of people that share a problem. And I love that definition, because if somebody doesn't have a problem, they're not in the market anymore. And so it's like it covers everything. And so if you go out there with an objective to solve a problem, you're going to enter the marketplace with something real. And that's what all of the best products in the world do. But like you said, we're so trained to do the wrong thing, that we can't help but not like the thing that we need the most. So going back to Rich said, I've never sold a product that people wanted. I always had to sell products that people don't want. And that resonated with me because, like you said, I sell a course that teaches you how to read a book better. And so one of the things that I teach people to do is schedule time to just think. And that's something nobody does, right?
Yeah.
I stole this from the CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner. He's scheduled one blank hour, doesn't matter how hectic, in the middle of the day, And he's like, at first it felt self-indulgent. Then I soon noticed that was the most productive hour of the day every single day. And so I think taking both of those approaches that Rich said is understanding that I have something people don't want, but that doesn't mean that they don't need it. They do need it. So it becomes an education process. Like you said, it's super difficult. When you buy my course, you don't just get the logins emailed to you. You get the logins emailed to you. You get access to the group, all of that. But then you have a call with someone on my team who teaches you how to use the app, teaches you how to use everything, and then also sets you up for your success plan. They're like, all right, so what do you want to work on? Some people want to get better at copywriting. Some people want to get better at media buying. Some people are just starting out. And then we create a document, and that whole thing gets processed through our team to set that person up for all of the lives and all, any future one-on-one they have with our team, to be centered around whatever they want to accomplish. That whole thing comes from a place of, I want to solve a problem. But like Rich said, it's people don't want the real solution. They want a quick fix. So it's a constant education and resetting and rethinking the entire process of how people consume information that really led me down the rabbit hole to where I created Traffic Pilot. We have a lot of gamification in Traffic Pilot. Like if you log in, we have a habit tracker, right? So day 2 of the course teaches you how to use it. That habit tracker is like online activity, reading, meditating, and exercising every day. And the whole point is to wire your brain to get dopamine releases on the 30, 30, 30, press enter, that, and if you do that 2 days in a row, you're heating up and get a notification. Day 3, you're on fire. And as you continue that streak, you get more experience points, which pushes you up the leaderboard. And you get if you're atop the leaderboard every month, you get free consulting with me. So all of these things, I put so much work into making this process fun because I know people fucking hate it. Like straight up, they just hate it. And I talked to Rich about how to get people to do what they don't want to do. And while I know it's risky and it's going to be very hard to sell this course out the front, and I have to continue selling it to the people that bought it after they've bought it, I came from a spot of understanding that if I actually solve a problem, all of my ads are going to be pull. I'm not going to have to push anything. It's just going to work. I'm just going to get tons of shares anyway. I'm just going to get it's just going to work.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's like Steve Jobs. I mean, that's one of his most famous things with the iPhone, right? He made a product that people didn't know they needed yet. Like the ability of the foresight to create something that people really need, but they aren't aware of their need for it yet is interesting. And this is going to we can put a pin in that because there's a whole other topic that I want to talk about, just like the future of of work and shit that I'm fascinated about, but we'll stay on this thread. Yeah, it's weird though as marketers, right? Because you've promoted a lot of courses, right? You've been the kind of guy behind the scenes for a lot of info products over the years, and a lot of here's what's fascinating. A lot of courses all do the same thing, right? Like I over decades, I'd imagine that every type of fitness program is put together, right? Like there really isn't anything, and I'm no longer a fitness expert. I did get my personal trainer certification in college when I was really into it, but people for the most part know how to get in shape. Like the knowledge is there, right? I think you go to any human being on the planet, okay, how does somebody get in shape? They're going to tell you, well, they should eat less calories than they burn. They should eat healthier. They should work out daily. Everyone knows it. The problem is execution, right? The problem is people know how to do it, but there's hyperbolic discounting that happens, which is, people value things today more than they value tomorrow, right? So if I know that eating the Snickers today will have long-term impacts on me tomorrow or next year, or that smoking the cigarette today, it's not going to kill me today, but probably in 30 years or 40 years, it's going to kill me. But that's 30, 40 years away. It's hard to value that. So, but the
Yes.
smoking the cigarette right now or taking the drink right now or eating the food right now, like I get an instant benefit and I value that really, really highly. So I'm going to do it. And that's the trick. I think that's the key is like, if you're creating info products, if you're creating training programs, is selling that, is like being able to overcome that aspect of it. It's not so much the information itself. Like the information isn't going to be groundbreaking for people because they're probably, if you're creating a fitness or money making
Yes.
opportunity or a marketing program, they probably already know most of the stuff. They've been taught it. It's, can I give them a system and a tool and a resource that is going to help them overcome that hyperbolic discounting and help them actually get the solution and execute. And nobody's really done that very well. Like that's why I love what you're doing. I know we're talking about promotion and stuff of it because it's focusing on the other thing. It's focusing on how do you develop the habits and how do you put a system and framework in place
Yes.
that puts responsibility in the person and they actually feel like they want to implement what they're learning and not just learn for the sake of learning, which is what most people do. Most people, this last thing I'll say, most people feel they conflate like learning with success. They feel like if I just take enough courses and just consume, it'll translate into success. But it's not about the consumption;
Yeah.
it's about the implementation, execution, but it's hard to do that. It takes a lot of
Yes.
work.
100%. So exactly what you're talking about, the smoking, the eating, that I covered that exact, like literally that exact topic in day 3 of the first week. And it's that, a lot of people, I don't teach people how to eat or not smoke, anything like that. But what that is an example of is an unearned dopamine loop, right? When I smoke that cigarette, people don't want to smoke. Lots of times they don't want to smoke. Like a good example is people that smoke a cigarette to calm down. That's the equivalent of saying, I'm going to drink a cup of coffee to calm down. Like, what? It's a stimulant. What are you talking about? How could that calm you down?
Yeah,
People chew tobacco to stay awake. But it's because the whole thing, they know that it's going to bring them relief, not necessarily actually calm them down. It's the relief that they want. And that's because there's a dopamine loop. They get a dopamine release when they take that hit. I know because I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for like 6 years, right? So it's that unearned loop. Now that's on a very obvious level, right? That's something that the Surgeon General knows will kill us, right?
yeah,
But on a micro level, there's a far more sinister trap, and it's in everybody's pocket right now, right? Your iPhone is the biggest source, or whatever, if you have whatever phone you have, is the biggest source of unearned dopamine loops in the world. You're gonna go to so like where this all started. I do a lot of deep work during my day. It takes hours to accomplish these projects. I kept finding I would get distracted 40 minutes in and I'd suddenly be scrolling Instagram. I was like, what is this? Like, why do I keep doing that? I read a lot about it. And basically, when my brain dopamine is binary to the brain. It either has it or it doesn't. And the brain doesn't care if it's actually good for the person, it just doesn't give me dopamine. And so when I'm doing something that's a low dopamine level task, like deep work, my brain is going to be like, fuck this, go on Instagram, get that quick dopamine release. And that becomes a loop. So when I'm doing something that is most valuable, I can't do it because my brain is so scattered. It led me to go without a phone, for literally no phone, for over 90 days, over 3 months, no iPhone, because I had to completely reprogram my brain. The results were ridiculous, right? As I'm sure, and Alex Becker talks about this too. But I think those types of things, I actually teach you how to do a dopamine detox. I got the framework from Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism in day 3. And so addressing those root issues, I find, is the biggest stuff. And that's why it's all week 1, is because like this, you may not have thought about it, but I promise you're going to get more results from this than any video view remarketing hack that I teach you.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. It's true. Like just being able to think more clearly and more effectively for longer periods of time is a game changer for anything. And I worry about like what the future holds, right? Because it's clearly like we're moving more rapidly on an exponential basis down a path where the brain is like, evolution takes a very, very long time. Like our biology, these things changing take massive amounts of time, but they do happen. Like if you look at, a human brain today versus 1,000 years ago versus 3,000 versus five, it changes, right? We have parts of our body that we no longer use now. We have organs that we don't really
Right.
like, that were there for a different purpose we no longer need. And it is weird to think, what happens 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, as we continue to move down this path where you like just crave that dopamine rush on a consistent basis. And because of the technology we use, right? It's like everything is, you post something and then you refresh it instantly to see if it gets a like, and then you refresh it 5 minutes after, and 10 minutes after, and 30 minutes
Yep.
after. And
Yep.
people I'm sure spend hours every day just refreshing stuff like that. That's pretty crazy to me, and I'm guilty of that
Yes.
too. And like I've made it like it's a big part of my routine now, like written down to not check numbers and not do things on a hourly or daily, even daily basis, because like just the act of like just scrolling and refreshing and scrolling and refreshing, and all the tools we have Slack, and you have email, and you have Messenger, and you have Skype, and you have Monday, and you have like, you could spend an entire day literally doing nothing. And I imagine that there are probably a good amount of people who do spend a lot of their days actually producing nothing. Like they feel like they worked a full day because they
Yes.
were engaging with stuff, but
Yes.
they actually didn't do anything.
Yes.
They just checked a lot of things. Like, and that's pretty mind boggling to me, that's like where we're at now. And I don't know, like it's obviously not going to get better unless something dramatically change, but I don't know, like I can't even fathom like what worse looks like, right? It's already so like a glue to your like face. I don't know how it like
Oh my gosh.
continues to get more out of control.
Yeah, I think the so it gets more out of control the more that apps promote like that quick fix, endless scroll. Apps like TikTok are a great example of this, right? You can spend 6 hours because everything takes 15 seconds to watch, right? So you can just scroll forever. And so the problem with this is that it creates a general, it's a decline that expounds upon itself, right? The curve gets steeper and steeper because the demand for meaningless content with no substance is increasing, and also anything good, like the better it is, the less engagement it gets. And so it creates like a barren landscape, a landscape where nothing can really thrive that has any substance. And so what's interesting about this, the nature of this conversation is that someone who strives to have substance, to remove themselves from the overexposure to these environments, and exist as a true creator, center their days around what they're producing, not what they're engaging with. Um, that person can go into the non-substance environment and figure out how to create content that will still win over those people. But the vice versa is not true.
Yeah.
And so, though the general decline that you've pointed out is scary, and I think we've really hit a point of no return. When people, the average Instagram user is like on their phone, it's like hours a day. It's like silly.
And the TikTok numbers are really, really crazy because our rep there, we had a call with like we haven't like really done anything on it yet, but they kind of invited us and we had an onboarding call and stuff. And they showed us like a proprietary deck internally. And I have the picture because I took like screenshots of all the slides. But like the
Yeah.
actual number of how many hours somebody spends on the app is insane. Like it was like,
Yeah.
I think it was like 2 or 3 hours more than Instagram. And it was like something like, I think 50% of all users post on the app once a week, which is like astronomical numbers. That mean like most people that are on the app are literally
Right.
spending like a close to like half or a quarter of their day like just on the app, which is just like how do you do anything? How,
Insane.
how do you how do you live as a human being if that's where you're spending all your time?
Right. Yeah,
But
it's amazing. And like you never go ahead.
the one thing I'll say is like anomalies are always interesting And the one thing that I can't fit into it is somebody like Rogan. Like it doesn't fit anything. And it's very strange to me how like the trend has been consistently to like shorter content, less, less substance, more focus on entertainment than any value. But then you have the biggest content creator essentially in the world, the most successful, that basically shoots his last video with Duncan Trussell, I think, was like 5.5 hours. Like he literally just did a
Yeah.
5+ hour interview and has millions of views. Like that's strange to me. Like, those two things shouldn't exist in the same universe. And I don't know
Right.
how you balance those two things.
So I would say it's like for every action there's a reaction, right? And you're looking at the example, like I think we see this play out in economics a lot, right? People that do what everyone else does have a very hard time surviving. If you're going to start a t-shirt store that sells just you're going to have a tough time,
Yeah.
right? But companies like Google create their own monopoly through their service, right? Now, when Google was questioned about this, they said, look, Google only has like 28% of the global ad share. We're a small fish in a big pond. We're the
Yeah.
least of your concerns. And it's like that's exactly what a monopoly would say.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, 100%. And so, you look at someone like Rogan, and he's doing the exact opposite of what all these, the lack of substance creators are. Yet he's reaping a reward that is like what, hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And these people that are TikTok famous, what are they making? The best ones are making like $1 million a year. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the guy that's doing it different. And that's just an example of, you have like an apex predator in an environment that is filled with a lot of smaller things that people crave something different, right? And because of that, Joe is on the top doing things differently than everyone else is doing them. Whereas all these other content creators are scrambling to make the exact same content and no one's seeing any success.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing, and what you said makes sense, and I guess like I think it's Rory Sutherland, a quote from him, from Alchemy, was like, just because something is true doesn't mean the opposite can't also be true. Which, yeah, that does fall into it. Um, but I think the thing with him, which now as we're talking about this makes more sense. Like I feel like most people on social media that try to be influencers, they create content that they think is going to get them the most engagement. And that's their primary reason for why they create content. Somebody like Rogan and people that have been very successful on podcasts, they're creating content that they actually want to create. Like he's doing it the
Yeah.
way he wants to do because he's been doing this for a long time and he did it because he wants to have fun. He wants to talk to smart people and friends and have like shoot the shit. Like that's what he does. He literally brings
Yes.
people in, they hang out, they drink, some whiskey, they smoke cigars, they just shoot the shit. They'll
Yeah.
talk for an hour, they'll talk for 3 hours, 5 hours. And
Whatever it is.
because it's what he loves doing, it's easy and effortless. He can do it more frequently, and people can resonate with that. And that's I think a trend that we'll see is like this. I mean, I hope we see is like a move to more authenticity, where it's people are creating content because first and foremost they want to create it for themselves, and they're putting themselves in situations that they want to be in, and the fact that it's being recorded and shared is like secondary, right? It's not the
Right.
primary reason. I mean, I don't know many people
Right.
that are doing it that way, but I know the people that are doing it that way, they're benefiting substantially right now.
Yeah, and that's the true creator, right? That's someone that's actually creating because they have a purpose. There's something more than just the production of everything. They're not trying to make a video to get views, but how come that video gets the most views, right? It's like it's a paradox, and all the most powerful and best things in life typically are, right? Like you can work all your life, but typically the money is not going to be more valuable than the love that you get from your family, which is for free, right?
Yeah.
So it's that paradox, and the things in life that are paradoxical in nature, like that, when you examine them further, they tend to be the most powerful and best things. And I think Joe is a great example of that in the content creator marketplace.
Yeah, he definitely is. It'll be interesting to see like 3, 5 years from now what
Yeah.
like the content marketplace looks like, because it's it's changing, it's diverging, and it's there's so much of it because the distribution channels have changed so dramatically. Where it used to be like to create content, you had a few places to distribute it, right? You had to be on like a TV network or a movie studio. Like there were very few places to like actually get your content out there. So it was much more competitive. Now it's like
Right.
any person in the world with a phone can get a piece of content seen by tens, hundreds of millions of people almost instantaneously. Um,
Yeah.
and that's pretty wild to think that that's like just how rapidly that's changed the distribution of content.
For sure. And that potential to go viral is why so many content creators are focused on the wrong thing,
Yep.
because they think they're gonna just, it's all about creating that piece that goes viral, gets millions of views, I make all that money. Joe Rogan's like, no, I'm just gonna create a podcast every week for the past 45 years. And eventually I accrue so much interest that I have so many regular fans who all share my shit because I made content I cared about and they thought it was cool, that the views are just way more than anyone who goes viral one time could ever grow, right? And that's where you make the most money as a content creator on your advertising CPMs. So it's funny to see how that's like an example of the same thing we talked about earlier of the entrepreneur posting his Shopify store that makes 500,000, right? It's like the wrong thing that's hyper sensationalized, which sets a bad optimization event for everyone else.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other big thing people need to think about is like what the end goal is, right? If you're out there creating content, like I think what's happened with TikTok and Instagram and all these platforms is really incredible for artists, for like leveling the playing field if you're a musician or a comedian or things like that, because that's what your passion is, and this gives you the ability to be seen and break out more effectively than before, right? Like Little Nas X and people that are just now they're megastars because they were talented up on a TikTok. They're signed, but they have a path, right? If you're a stand-up comic and you're using it as a means to get your comedy out there, you have a path. It's like, okay, I get noticed now, I get signed, I get a Netflix special, I can build a brand. I don't know what the game plan is for a lot of people, which is like, I don't really have any skills or talents, but like I want to get viral because if I get viral, I think money comes with it. And it's like, I think people need to realize is there's only so much ad budget, like influencer marketing. You're not going to get super wealthy that way. Maybe a few anomalies do, but like beyond that, like what do you do? You're not going to build, a company. You're not going to be, get a Netflix special or an HBO special. You're not going to get signed by a music label. Like, and I don't think enough people think about that. They think about like the short term. It's like I go big and money's got to come because I get viral and I get all these views and I'm going to make a lot of money. But it's like, well, what happens in 2 years or 6 months from now when nobody cares about you anymore, right? Like when that video is a thing of the past.
Exactly. And what, so many tiny little things, one little social media tweak that prevents your post from being in the feed now destroys your career, right? That's craziness. To where what could stop Joe Rogan at this point? Let's say the Spotify deal falls through. He could just make JoeRoganPodcast.com and everyone would still go there. And because the monetization of his popularity is effortless when you built it on a strong foundation. It's the same reason why Facebook was able to monetize so easily after losing millions of dollars, whereas other companies lose millions of dollars and they try to mimic the same model, but they never had a clear path to monetization to begin with, right? And I think something like Snap is a great example. It was like they thought they were just going to be able to run ads, but they didn't ever count on Instagram just taking their ad space because they had better ad tech.
Yeah, I mean, it's the .com bubble. It's literally the same exact. It's a Silicon Valley model of which has been this way for a very long time. Of if you build it and you get a lot of eyeballs, money will come, and that piece of advice has led to the bankruptcy and failure of pretty much most Silicon Valley startups. Like most companies are out of business. They don't make it because they focus first on eyeballs instead of having a business model. And I think influencers are kind of like that now, where it's like not all of them, right? This is obviously a very generic, loose statement, but like a
Right.
lot of them are focused on if I just get enough views and subscribers, then I can make money somehow. Somebody will want to sponsor me and stuff. Instead of thinking about like, well, what am I passionate about now? What am I really interested in? Like, can I build a brand? Can I build a company? What is like, if I get these things, what can I do with it? Like really putting thought into it before you go out there and do something and making sure there's actually a path to success. Like Rogan has, he's partners and on it. Like he has lots of stuff going on. Like all, and like
Yeah.
Kevin Hart the same way. Kevin Hart, like, hey, I become big, but like I also now I have a production studio. I have investment deals in these brands. Like they have a bigger plan of how they're going to leverage their influence once they have it. They didn't just like wait one day until they were famous and decide like, what do I want to do with my celebrity essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And Rogan's a good example because when he was first running his podcast, I don't know, people probably don't remember this, but there was like he would do two long ass ad reads and then the entire podcast, right? So that's an example of a dude that was out there hustling, getting a bunch of deals with companies just on the low before the ad placements could give him the revenue alone that he needed, because he was aware that there had to be a practical business model behind the content creation. Because he had that, it allowed him to take it to whatever direction that he wanted, and that's ultimately why he's so successful today, like we were just talking about. It's really funny you bring up the dot-com bubble because it's such a good metaphor for exactly what we're talking about, right? For people that don't know, the dot-com bubble was caused when Silicon Valley, website traffic had first hit the scene, right? So the stock markets didn't know how to value companies that had shit tons of web traffic. So they stopped basing the valuations of companies on, prehistoric things like revenue and profit, and started valuing companies based off clicks. And, it was the first bubble explosion that I've lived through. I know the next one was real estate. Now this one here, it's like a millennial pastime, the economy exploding. But it's crazy to see people not understanding how to value attention. And I think that's what's so fascinating about what the media buyer does. The exchange rate for trading attention for money, quite literally,
Yeah.
right? And that's the media buyer's job. And it's kind of the solution to the problem that was presented with how to value web traffic. The web traffic in itself is not really inherently that valuable. However, targeted intention-based web traffic is. And it's interesting to see because that generates, you buy attention at an exchange rate. Let's say your ROAS is 3. You have an exchange rate of 1 to 3. Every dollar you spend buying attention is worth 3 on the back end. And that's that comes from all the stuff we were just talking about, the business model, the offer, that ad, getting all of those right, and, solving what caused the bubble when traffic first came out.
Yep. 100%. So, I wanted to just pivot. You mentioned before about, Google and kind of being a monopoly. I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are just on the state of like the big tech companies. So even like today, as we're speaking, the market's tanking because
Yeah.
tech stocks are tanking because basically this entire rally we've seen the last few months has been driven by 6 companies, and the rest of the market's kind of actually like lost money or broken even. Like I'm torn on this, and I talked to a few people about it on the show and just privately. Like as a kind of pure capitalist and free market person, I want to believe and be like, if you just outcompeted everybody and now you just are the big, whether you're Amazon or Facebook or Apple, and like you control the entire marketplace essentially, like, is it fair to put a ceiling on somebody's success if they got there? And then the other part of me is like, the fact that, you know, like Apple, like I was saying the other day, Apple, if they decided, like stuff happening with Epic Games now, where they're all this fight with Epic and these big apps. Like if Apple decided tomorrow that we think Facebook now violates our terms of use and we're just going to remove them from the App Store, like they could borderline like destroy Facebook. I mean, like most people access Facebook mobilely and Instagram, and a lot of people
Yeah,
use
yeah,
iPhone, right? So it's like that's
yeah.
kind of crazy to think, and not just that's Facebook, but they could do it with any company. That like one company basically controls so much of other companies' success and destiny, and I don't know like what the answer is. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay, so dude, that's a good question. So, I, you know, you look at if you look at the history of, let's just use the United States. You look at the history of the United States, basically antitrust laws, right, is what we're talking about. Like, what reach does the government have to restrict a monopoly? And the reason I put that term in quotes is because it's harder to define than you think. And in a globalized economy, that definition of monopoly is a lot less black and white, right? You and I would both agree Google is functionally a monopoly on search, right?
Yep.
It's very hard to say otherwise. But again, if you look at the global advertising budget, it's really not. It's hard to make that argument. It doesn't. The data doesn't seem to be there for a monopoly, and so I think these type of like functional monopolies, the government can't really do anything about. What are you going to do? Tell people to stop going to Google? Like it's just not going to happen. And so I think those types of monopolies, someone should strive to create. Right? That's the type of business you want, or at least invest in. Um, Now you look at what's happening with like companies like Google who are trying to grow their ad spend and trying to grow their imprint, and they're essentially now in just maximize revenue mode. The whole ideal of not be evil is kind of being thrown out the window. And so you could say, well, I don't really have another marketplace to go. Google's raising their prices, doing things that are gouging me. Isn't this a monopoly? Should the government step in and break it up? My answer would always just be no, because the government would do a worse job than the market would eventually. Eventually, people will get sick of that bullshit. Eventually, someone will figure out how to provide something better. And there's already a ton of other search engines out there that are just as good as Google. So this idea that this monopoly is purely protected by the forces of capitalism is not real. A good example would be of like the banks, right? Or anything that's too big to fail. It's like if you're bailed out if people think that you need to bail out those companies because so many people would lose their jobs, etc. That's not true. That would not happen. The people that own the company and the shareholders, the ones that took all the risk, they would lose everything. But likely their shares would be sold for pennies on the dollar. A smart buyer would come in there, swoop everything up, restructure the company using the existing assets, including employees that are there, and create productivity that way, which would provide way more value to the economy. And, so I look at monopolies as typically something that governments create through things like bailouts or the offers that like states will offer Amazon a shit ton of money, like those types of things. Monopolies are created by the state, but the marketplace, it's like if someone has a true monopoly that actually prevents the market from thriving due to globalization and technology, it's going to be broken up by the people through a superior product. So I don't really see a place or even a mechanism that the government could use to effectively break up the tech monopolies. Now, where we go from here, where in 10 years, where the internet's owned by three people, I have no idea. Like you said, these companies are so interwoven, it's really, really difficult to navigate. But that also means that the stock values of those companies are so interwoven. There's like a mutually assured destruction almost that keeps things safe. But it's amazing to look at the fragility of the net when you talk about how like you could really destroy something just by Apple being like, no more Facebook app. And it's like, okay, there's 30% of the market share gone. You know, that's like a full extinction event.
Yeah, it's like all of them. I mean, Amazon. I mean, Amazon already does do this, where they, they find a hot product that's crushing it, and they make it themselves and then put it at the first listing. Like I know, quite a few people who, sold tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of product on Amazon, and like Amazon just ripped their listing essentially and moved them down a slot. Like went to their manufacturer, they got a better deal on it, so they sell it for
Yep.
cheaper. They add bonuses to it, and it's like, how do you compete with that? So it's like the Apples and the Amazons where you're both the market maker and then you also compete in the market. That's where it gets tricky. But at the same time, you're right. It's like you really can't effectively at this point. I think you're kind of past the point of no return where like
Yes.
the government can't come in and effectively break these companies up. Like, yeah, they could split Facebook and Instagram, but it's like that's not going to have
Sure.
a massive impact. Like Apple, I don't know how you break up. There's not an easy split where it's like by breaking them up, it eliminates the impact that they have on everything. But yeah, it'll
Yeah, and
it'll
like,
be
well,
fascinating.
like look at that exactly what you just said. Breaking up Facebook and Instagram. It's like, okay, you break them up. Now they just become partners, right? So they're not owned by a parent company. They're owned by two separate companies, but they have a partnership that is functionally indifferent to exactly what just existed.
Yeah,
So it's like, what's the point, right? What is the point? There's absolutely none. And so we're in this weird place where the usage of a marketplace is what determines its ultimate value.
yeah,
And that is so far outside of the possible reach of the government that if you wanted to break up the Amazon monopoly, you would essentially have to be like, Amazon, give us your servers. This is now ran by the United States federal government. Like, there's just no, you'd have to go full communist or fascist on it. There's no other way to effectively do it. And so it really, the future, in my opinion, is going to be won by whoever can functionally upset those monopolies.
yeah. And what you said earlier is interesting, which is like technically the market has functioned to take down monopolies, but it just hasn't like there's been intervening forces that have prevented it, right? So it's the
Yeah.
banks in 08, 09, like the government decided which ones to let stay, which ones to bail out, which ones needed to merge to stay strong and solvent. Um, and yeah, it's a trade off because their argument, and there's been lots of documentary stuff on this, like with Hank Paulson, like is that if they didn't act and they didn't do some of the things they would do, it would have created this massive domino that would have basically destroyed the entire global economy. Again, it's like, we'll never know that actually would have happened. But
Sure.
even so, it's like like I think we were so used to, we live in, the United States and the way it's been since our founding. But the reality is like, there's been, empires and massive civilizations that have come, they've grown, bad stuff's happened, they failed, and then a new one comes, right? It's like the Roman Empire doesn't exist
Yep.
anymore. There's all these things. And so it sounds very negative to say, but I think it's like, if there is ambitious, driven people out there who are intelligent, there will always be people to pick up the pieces. It's not going to be like, if the airlines failed, that everyone would just collectively say, we were good. We don't need to fly anymore. Like, I think let's just let that thing die. It's no, there's going to be people out there that are going to see the opportunity and they're going to say, hey,
Yeah.
like, I think I can do it more efficiently. And, if you're the airlines, maybe, during the boom times, they shouldn't have bought back so much stock, right? They shouldn't have paid out so much. Like maybe they should have reserved that cash and they wouldn't have needed a bailout if they ran more efficiently. And so if
Yes.
they failed and somebody came in and said, okay, well, this is a mistake they made. They cater to their shareholders too much. They bought back too much stock to inflate their stock, the share price, instead of putting aside, $50 billion or $20 billion or whatever in case of a disaster. That's a mistake. Like Apple sits on, $100+ billion in cash.
Yes.
because hey, it's like if
You read
they
my
see
mind.
an acquisition, they can buy a company. If shit goes bad for a year, 2 years, and they need to innovate, like they can survive. Like that's a smart company that isn't just deciding
Yeah,
we're going to give all of our cash back to shareholders and we're just going to make our executives more money. And I don't think people should be rewarded for that, right? It's like if you do that and you succeed, good, awesome. But if you do that and then you realize you needed the money, like you should fail, right? It's not fair to say, capitalism and free markets are applicable for companies up to this size. And then essentially once you get to this size,
exactly,
the laws of capitalism no longer apply. You can't operate that way.
exactly, exactly. And it's like it's funny because the state is the state believes that it is the antitrust mechanism that keeps the market safe. But in actuality, it functions as the exact opposite because it picks which tyrant it wants to install. And what's cool about functional monopolies like Amazon and Google is they expose the ridiculous nature of the state believing it has that power because capitalism is a natural extension of human nature. It's not something that can be created, it's not something that needs your protection. It's something that can be regulated, and I think in a lot of cases should, but that does not, it shouldn't just be unfettered. But that doesn't, what I'm saying is you don't have to do anything to make it work. And so the whole idea that the state breaking up monopolies is, the antitrust portion or the antitrust mechanism is the state is fundamentally flawed and exposed by the functional monopolies that exist today because there is no mechanism for breaking them up.
Yeah. And there's no experts, just like as we saw when they did the hearings and stuff. It's like the people in charge with actually deciding whether these companies get broken up have no idea how these companies actually operate. Like they don't understand the technology at all. They don't understand how they make money. Like you can't you can't legislate over something you don't understand, right? If you don't know how Facebook makes money, like how can you say they're monopoly? Like how can you sit there and say
Oh
that
my,
they're doing something wrong when you don't understand what they're actually doing in the first place? It's complete hypocrisy, and they're relying on their aides and interns to tell them like what these things actually do and how they work. And that's kind of terrifying. It's like even if I thought or you thought it was a good idea that like they'd be broken up, it had to be a totally different body. It had to be some type of like hybrid private public sector panel made up of like successful CEOs and legislators that comes in and decides how something happens. But even that has a lot of flaws in it.
100%. And that's such a creative solution, Max. Like you just, like I guarantee you no one on the Senate is capable of coming up with something even that clever. Did you see what they asked Mark Zuckerberg? It
Yeah.
was like we're like 45 minutes into the hearing and they're asking how this motherfucker makes money. It's like this is a joke. Who do you think you are? So Mark Zuckerberg saying, "Senator, we run ads
Yeah.
at like an hour into the meeting. Are you kidding me?" And so a lot of these bureaucrats and a lot of these people that it's like when I said earlier, that's exactly what a monopoly would say. It's like if you're telling me that I have to bail out your business or the whole global economy is going to collapse, you're a fraud, and that's what a fraud would say. Like you don't deserve a dollar because first of all, in '07, it was going to get worse. Really, like, no, everyone lost their home. The market just was destroyed. If you would have let really savvy investors come in there, you rebuild banks. I mean, that could have been a time for a complete redistribution of wealth in a powerful way. But instead, the state functioned as a way of entrenching bad actors in the market and causing the very problems that it says it exists to solve. And so it's so ridiculous. And it's just an example of a system that is upkept by people who have no idea how it actually works. And that's why shitty, boring people go into politics.
Yeah. It's definitely it definitely is one of the reasons, and one of the reasons why it's like having career politicians is so so dangerous, because it's like if you've been, and not to make this even political, but like if you've been in office for since you were like 30 years old and you're now 60 or
Yes.
70, like you have no idea how things work. Like you don't have no experience. You don't you're totally disconnected. You live in this bubble where it's like you have the best healthcare in the world, you have the best security in the world, like
Yeah.
all these things, and it's they're not even aware of their hypocrisy. It was like the LA mayor when all the riots, I think it was LA or one of the like when all the riots were happening, had was like saying defund the police while they had police cars providing them security. Like, and then it just all
Yeah.
these things. Nancy Pelosi
Yeah.
yesterday was at a hair salon that should have been closed, and she's like, and it's on both sides. It's not just one side. It's like you're just
Yeah, totally.
they're not even intentionally doing it. They're just so disconnected that they're not even aware of like their actions. What they say are just so out there. Like it's it's wild. And I don't know how that shifts. I imagine it's at some point there needs to be a dramatic change, but
So,
you don't know what it looks like.
Max, I'm here. I'm saying there needs to be a new party, right? You call it the Purple Party. It's pro capitalism, pro First and Second Amendment, pro LGBTQ,
Yep.
pro racial equality. Like we've been told pro, like I think like I'm a capitalist, I'm a business owner. I would vote for lower business taxes. I would also vote for a really smart healthcare plan. I did not like that Obamacare was destroyed because I thought if we already took this bitter ass pill, let's just make it better, right? I'm actually down for a healthcare system because I think over it's provided by the government or supplemented by the government because I think over a 20, 30-year time frame, that's going to improve our GDP, right? But you have people that are so used to succeeding without creating value that you have government or politicians who now want a higher office. They've been in government for 60 years and they're like, I'm going to turn this ship around in the next 4. It's like, what'd you do for the previous 60? Like we're going to suddenly give you this and now it's all going to work. Like, you got to be kidding me. And then politicians do the exact same thing that the scummy bankers do, presenting that false dichotomy by saying, if you don't vote for me, if you vote for the other guy, it's going to go to shit, right? The Republicans said that about Obama. The liberals said that about Trump. And at the end of the day, we're still here. Everyone, jobs are still going. Maybe things are good or bad, but it's not the end of the world. And this false dichotomy of scaring people into doing something that you want is why you have these people who have absolute no idea what's going on in the world in positions of power because they're so removed from the things that make people actually successful existing in this little bubble that you have the out of touch senator we run ads moment all too common that we now expect from our government.
I love it, dude. I think that's about as good a place to to wrap it as we
Yeah.
could. We
Yeah.
ended with we started very specific. We ended with a new political party, and I think that's
All right,
about as full circle. But yeah, I agree 100%. I think there needs to be more choice. Choice is a good thing in markets. It's a good thing in politics,
yeah.
and it works in other countries. We've just been entrenched in this. You're either a Democrat or Republican for a very, very long time. And hopefully, maybe it's on next election after that, but sometime in the next 10, 20 years, there's an actual like serious candidate who can make a third party work and give us some options, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, maybe we get 7 parties in there, some crazy stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about Traffic Pilot a little bit. If you wanted to share anything before we
Yeah.
wrapped it.
So yeah, definitely go to trafficpilot.com. Everything's spelled normally. Go check it out. It really doesn't matter where you are in your online journey. We're going to help you get there. I have a free training you can sign up for to learn how it works. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I came, when I came into this game, I didn't start online marketing because I thought it was like a cool way to get rich. It was like I had literally $7 to my name. I was living in a halfway home. I had been in trouble with I was at my ropes and I got into this because I needed to survive. And it ended up changing everything about me. All the bad parts of my character were eliminated on this journey because I kept realizing that I was not fit enough to go to that next level. Traffic Pilot addresses that. It addresses the issues that make us successful people. So success is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And all the digital marketing stuff is super good. It's powerful, but if you don't have that, you don't have anything. So go check out the site. Go check out the training, trafficpilot.com. And yeah, man, hopefully I'll be back for a third one. I don't know if Rich has done a third one, but I'd love to finally do something that Rich Sheffrin hasn't.
He isn't. So you guys have both done two. You know, people that have done two. So I'll make sure that you come back and do a third one. We'll keep increasing the time allocated for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate it.
2 hours.
2 hours next one. I look forward to it. And everyone watching, thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Max.
Later.